I think we have to allow a couple of minutes for the elevators. Okay, while we are waiting for our co-chair. Hello. Is this working at all? A little bit. So for our presenters, you probably have to eat it. So while we are waiting for our co-chair to come, this is really fun here because I used to make my slides in 4:3. And then I got more and more slides in 16:9 format. So I converted all my slides to 16:9 format because the IETF projectors are all 16:9. And of course, this venue now has 4:3 projectors again. So what we are seeing here is the original 4:3 slide in a 16:9 box in a 4:3 box. So I hope you all brought your telescopes to see these slides. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's IP and IP and IP, exactly. Okay, so this is the Constrained RESTful Environments Working Group. Chaim and I are chairing that. We need blue sheets. I hope you can generate those. We need scribes. So who can stand in as scribes today? Thomas, do you go to the Etherpad as usual? Yeah. Great. So Christian, can you join him on the Etherpad to fill in? Okay. And can somebody go on Jabber? Who is on Jabber? And you don't have to scribe. That's a bit misleading, but nobody here has Jabber. Well, I have Jabber, but I need my laptop for presenting. Okay, Chaim will be the Jabber communicator. And this is the place where you can see the Etherpad. So everybody's invited to fill in things like getting their name correctly. Yes. That should be the same one. Or I'm very confused. Good. Okay, good. So you have seen this slide by now. Note well, IPR guidelines apply. You will be photographed, taped, whatever. And if you know about a patent claim for something you're talking about, you either tell us or you don't talk about it. We have a pretty interesting agenda this time because in original planning we thought we wouldn't need that much time, and turns out that that was a bit wrong. So we have a 90-minute meeting today, and we'll try to advance some of the most pressing items, except those that conflict with HomeNet. Those will be on Friday because there is a HomeNet meeting running at the same time. Everybody's leaving now? No. So that's the idea for today. Then on Friday, we are doing the other things, including a little bit of new work that is coming in. But because the time really is not enough, we have asked the AD for a room for Thursday. This is officially a hallway meeting. So this is not a working group meeting. We are not going to make decisions there, but we are still able to inform each other of what's going on. And of course, since most of the people who will be there are working group members, this does advance the common understanding of the working group. So we will do some very new work, like the way CoAP is used in Anima, the object security for multicast draft, delegated, observe, and CoAP over the WebRTC data channel. So the idea is to give feedback to the authors on this work, advance common understanding, but it is not a working group meeting. And we actually may have a little time at the end, so we may be able to pick up some things that fall on the floor today. So for instance, in the TCP segment, we will focus on one issue, and it may be a good idea to talk about other issues because the working group last call just finished. But again, it's not a working group meeting. We will try to get a little bit minuting so people can find out what happened. We won't have remote participation for this meeting, but we will have a nice U-shaped seating arrangement. So maybe that's actually good for discussing the new work. Okay, so you all have the agenda in front of you. Is there any agenda bashing we need to do, Brian?
Would it make sense to move object security before collateral?
I don't mind doing that. Francesca, is that okay with you? Let's do that. Yes?
Just one thing on the agenda. The last item is 0 minutes.
Yes, so yeah, the idea is that we are very hopeful that we can finish this a little bit early and actually get to this. And if not, then we will have to use up the flex time we have here on the Friday meeting. Okay, let's quickly go through the status of the working group. So this is the milestones. You can see we are late on a few of our milestones. It is always the case that the last 20% are a little bit harder than you think they are. But I'm hopeful we will be able to mostly complete the TCP work today and make significant progress on the other things. And we will have a little bit of a fireside chat on links JSON tomorrow. That stuff is done, baked, just works, but we want to understand whether we want to maybe change it again. Anyway. Okay, so this is the status of the things that have left the working group. Block is finally an RFC. I think we did the last interop on this in London, like how many years ago? So it's nice that we have that finished now. HTTP mapping is still in the ISG with 2 discusses. As usual, we didn't do enough security admonition, but there is another point that maybe Akbar wants to speak about.
Yes, thanks, Carson. I sent an email this Akbar. So the thing about the informational, my understanding was the ISG, one of the reviewers was recommending that it be PS, proposed standard, and there was some back and forth. Hopefully you were on the emails. And the conclusion seemed to be, yes, that it should be PS, but I guess the question back to you as the chairs in the working group is, does that make sense?
Well, the working group reviewed it as a document that goes for informational, but we did have that discussion here, and it turned out it was a little bit between the lines. So we made a more or less arbitrary decision, in my point of view, that we would keep it informational. But I think it's important to raise this once more whether anybody has a problem with pushing this up to a proposed standard. So this will be a proposed standard with a lot of guidance in it and a little of protocol. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone running to the microphone, so maybe we should actually go in that direction.
Okay, and just the status on the security, we're going to meet again with the security AD, Stefan, for his final comment. The comment basically was he was recommending when the HTTP client contacts the proxy that some sort of client authentication be mandatory. That's essentially his main point, and there was back and forth. I think Thomas, one of the authors, was arguing that it should be the application that decides and not the HTTP proxy. So I guess we're going to try to close that.
We will have some good discussion about mandatory security in the TCP segment. So maybe we can even pick this one question up afterwards once more. Okay, so this is the HTTP mapping graph. Now, one comment we got was, how does the HTTP mapping for fetch and patch look like? And the view of the authors was that the current draft is based on the experience we have with mapping the existing methods, and putting in new content that is not experience-based probably wasn't a good idea. But this kind of implicitly puts on our plate to think about HTTP mapping for fetch and patch in the future, probably when we have a little bit more implementation experience with that. Okay, the fetch and patch document, which is abbreviated as ETCH here, that has still one discuss pending. The authors believe that discuss is addressed, but since the draft is 48 hours old, it's not all discusses have been cleared so far. So 2 discusses have been cleared, but the third one is still open. So this should be done very soon. Of course, we now have to make sure that we actually have this working in our implementations. So this is one of the drafts where we have been charging ahead with defining things, so implementers feel comfortable with actually implementing it, and should work because it's not particularly complicated, but yeah, it would be good to get those implementations going. Okay, so much about the working group status. Any other question about that? Then let's move forward to object security co-op. Oh, you need 3 hands.
Yeah, no, it's there to check the time.
Okay.
Or you can stop me if you think it's taking
You
too
have the
long.
time here.
Oh, great. Hello, yes. So hi, I'm Francesca Palombini. I'll be presenting object security of co-op. So the status, a status update for this draft. So first of all, for those of you who have not been following the discussion about OS co-op, I copy-pasted here a slide that recap what OS co-op is. So very quickly, OS co-op defines a method for in-layer security of co-op message exchanges using the COSI format. Yeah, so I'll let you read this slide. If you have more questions, you can come and talk to me. Also, this time I wanted to give, okay. Also, this time I wanted to give some kind of background for this work, so or related work to this draft. So I think these links are not clickable, but I think the slides are going to be shared, and in the PDF of this presentation only, you can click and follow which draft is for each. So OS co-op is dependent on co-op RFC and the COSI draft that is now in IESG review. That is itself linked or to HOSI, working group and drafts, and the CBOR RFC. Also, to put it a bit into context, we have several drafts now that make use of OSCOAP. So we quote some that we know of. So the OSCOAP profile in ACE, the 6-ish minimal security, and the multicast OSCOAP that is going to be presented tomorrow in core. So please join. And also to put this in even larger context, we added here some other drafts that are relevant to this work. And there is on the left side, there is all the ACE work with the ACE framework and other profiles that are being developed. So to go to the draft status now. So we feel like the draft is stable right now. Share here the GitHub. There has been some changes since last meeting that I'm going to go through. And as I said, it's used in the secure joint processing 6-ish, in the OSCOAP profile for ACE, and we have released 2 open sources implementation, which are work in progress. So what's new? So this is what's new in this version of this draft is basically about the context. So this is the security context. So the context definition is expanded. We have changed the section context derivation. What was called context derivation is now context establishment, and we hope that this is more clear and better structured. We separate the derivation of keys, IVs, and the initialization of sequence numbers to another subsection that is for context identifier and sender and recipient identifier. So we give guidelines and recommendation, and this is modification done according by comments that we got. Also, because of comments and reviews, we changed the CID to be 64. So we recommend it to be 64 bits pseudo-random so that it's globally unique. And we also add this, that sender ID is optionally sent in the message. So we define a new COSI header parameter called SID. So when I talk about sender and recipient ID, this is new in the context definition that I was talking before. So here I try to recap what is the security context up there. So the security context is the set of information elements necessary to carry out the cryptographic operation in OSCOAP. And we separated this into 3 parts: common, sender, and recipient context. And we added this sender identifier and recipient identifier. So for each node, the sender identifier is the identifier of the node itself, and the recipient identifier is the identifier of the node it's talking to. So this is one new thing. The context establishment define how to derive from a set of input parameter, which are on the left in this slide, to derive the full security context, which is the parameter on the right. So it's common, sender, and recipient context. So in this slide, I just wanted to give an example of derivation or establishment, because some parameters are obvious. So for example, the recipient ID is just the same that was input. Others follow a more specific derivation, like for example, the sender key is derived with as input parameters the context identifier, a base key, the sender ID, and the algorithm. So this sender key is linked to all these parameters. So before I go forward, just wanted to say why we have added this sender and recipient identifier. This is also from a comment from a review. This is for the case where client and server switch roles. And adding these 2 identifiers will allow to keep the context as is. Also, adding the context identifier allows multicast support. So this is going to be discussed tomorrow. We just wanted to put this in there. A broadcaster can talk to many listeners and have one recipient context for each node it's talking to. So you can see the example in this slide. So there has also been minor modifications that are also caused by comments and reviews. So transaction identifiers now, context identifier, sender ID, and sender sequence number. We have changed how the request URI is integrity protected. We have changed what is a request URI, so slight modification there. And we have defined the external AAD as a CBOR array, while before we defined as a byte string. And yeah, this and other issues were dealt with. You can find them in the issue tracker, so please go take a look and feel free to add new. And I wanted to thank Malisha, Jim, Martin, and Joachim for the helpful review that created all these changes. Also talking about implementation, this was released as open source last IETF. So this is just the old slide from that presentation. And we have now released a new implementation in C. You can find it here. So it's based on Contiki and Erbium. And comparing to what we had last meeting, we have removed external dependencies from external libraries. So now it's in Contiki, and it's based on the version 04 of the draft. So both implementations are based on 04 on the draft. This will be 06, but it's now 00 because it's an adopted document. And so they are still work in progress, but they're open. You can go and check them. So to summarize, the draft is stable, and we feel like it's ready for implementation. We have had several security reviews. We have 2 implementations, Java and C from 6. And we always welcome further reviews, and particularly from co-op experts. We feel like could be helpful. And of course, more implementations for interoperability testing. That's it. Thank you. Yes.
Jim Schad. At the last face-to-face meeting, a use case was presented whereby one wanted only integrity protection and not encryption, so that certain proxies in the middle could read the data, but it would still be protected. Is there any intention to address that?
So I'm not sure I remember this use case. So I have some backup slide following some discussion that, so I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but if it's the caching use case, no.
The specific use case that was presented dealt with a meter was sending results back to the corporate headquarters, and the house wanted to be able to read that message as it was flowing by.
No, we have not addressed that, and please, if you could forward this again to us offline.
I'm too lazy to run to the other microphone, excuse me. How do you actually produce these sender and receiver IDs? Who sets them?
So these are in OSCOAP. There are these input parameters for the security context. So we assume that they are already there in place, but we have other drafts. For example, this ad hoc draft that we are presenting in ACE that that sets it in place. So initialize them, but for a co-op, you consider this to be preset in the node.
So what are the uniqueness requirements that you have there?
So we have, so we recommend the context identifier to be globally unique, and the sender and recipient identifier to be locally unique within a group of nodes that share this security context.
Okay, so it would be the job of one party to verify the uniqueness of the identifier of the other party, or how does that work?
So if you think that there is some kind of group manager, for example, let me go to the slide, this one. A group manager that would synchronize this and make sure that each node has a different identifier in the group.
Okay.
But this is like done before running a co-op.
Okay, I'm asking that because we have had several rounds of discussing endpoint identifiers in the research group, and this is another thing that looks a little like an endpoint identifier, and I think we want to make sure that we understand the relationship of these identifiers.
Yes.
Okay, who has read the most recent version of this draft? About 5? Who has read a version of the draft? More like 15? Okay. So I'm not hearing any feedback. That may mean everybody is not interested in this, or everybody thinks it's just exactly what we need. So I think we need a little bit of feedback.
So yes, we have people who have committed to. So we have a few people who have committed to review, even outside of this working group.
Right. So a possible next step that we as a working group could do, this is definitely not ready for working group last call because it hasn't had enough playing around with. But what we could do as a working group is decide we are not going to do random tweaks to it at the moment, but we recommend this document to implementers to actually implement, so we can get feedback from them and then do the next round of tweaks based on that feedback. So I would call that procedure identifying an implementation draft. And I think it would be a good idea to actually do this. And I'm wondering whether this is the right version, or should we wait one more version with that?
Personally, we feel like it's ready.
Yeah. Does anybody else have an opinion on this?
It's everything is solved right now. You can. We don't have any open issue.
Okay.
We're always waiting for feedback. So.
Thomas Otene. We started an implementation of this in OpenWSN, just for your information. I didn't catch what you said, Karsten. An implementation draft, you mean have a separate document that lists like a temporary?
It's just that I mean, we have RFCs, and we know those are stable.
Yep. And
we have working group drafts, and we know those are already quite good, but not necessarily stable. And the idea is that we give a particular version of the document the status of an implementation draft, which means the working group thinks this is stable enough to actually go ahead and implement it, because we are not going to tweak some parameter next week.
Yep.
So my proposal would be to actually get a call out on the mailing list about flagging this as an implementation draft. This probably would be something like a 1-week call after the IETF has ended. And then we probably want to identify a date where we actually run an interop, not necessarily a physical interop, because this can be done very well over the internet. But maybe we can all join a Google Hangouts and test our implementations against each other. Would mid-January be a good time for that? Or should we do this earlier? Should we do this later? Okay, people seem to like mid-January for that. So, okay, I think we have a plan. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you.
Yep, comment.
Oh, there's a question.
Comment just on Jabber. So Christian Amsus, so +1 on mid-January on Jabber.
Great.
And we'll also try to do an implementation for this on mid-January. So we're pretty interested in it. Yeah, sorry. So we are also pretty interested in your work, and we'll also try even more. Okay. And we'll try for mid-January. Thanks.
Thanks.
That's a good question. Okay, so one question was, what exactly do we want to test in that interop? And I think we can hash this out in the mailing list, because there are several modes to run this in, and we probably should first find one that is low threshold as possible. Thank you. Okay, so we are actually exactly in schedule, and go back to Quiet over Reliable.
IETF really needs to change the layout of the rooms for presenters. So since IETF 96, basically, there's been 2 drafts that addressed all the issues that we discussed at that meeting, including the mandatory exchange of the capabilities and settings messages on connection. Karsten has noted in his working group last call feedback that could break OCF 1.0, though we haven't had any feedback directly from OCF members. Added support for the CoAPS plus TCP port, and more detail. I think there was some confusion about how ALPN would work, so there's been more detail there that's been reviewed. Some other minor things, just updated references and such. And you know, the biggest conversation we had last time was on the security considerations. And then in the fifth version, basically, I've added an appendix because I felt that there needed to be much more clarity about how this updated the behavior for observe. So the working group last call has been in progress. I thank Karsten and Christian Groves for their very detailed feedback. I am capturing, as I go through the mailing list issues, I'm capturing specific issues. Could we display those really quick?
Really quick, I don't know, but we can display it.
Okay.
Keep talking.
So I'll be capturing, I'll break down each mail message into separate topics that are related, and so that we'll have clarity and tracking so that we know that we've closed off all the issues. If they're minor editorial points, I'll just do direct pull requests for those.
Changing the resolution always takes a long time on the Mac.
I was talking to Hammy. My intentions are, after we go through the working group last call issues and publish the 06 draft, and this will be probably in 3 weeks because it's a US holiday when I get back. My intention would be to have a working group last call 2. So we can just make one more pass through this and you know, make sure that no other issues have been introduced, you know, based on the edits. And then I think we would be ready, hopefully, for an IETF last call. So most of the issues you'll note are editorial issues. There's some minor things about a design change to ping and pong to have a must. I was talking to Karsten this morning. There's a lot of can do this, can do that, but I think we need to tighten that up a little bit. There was another case in Christian's feedback where some behavior was unclear, where a may statement would probably help in that case. So again, everything will always be here. You can always see the state of the draft And a number of these have already been addressed because I have a pull request that I've been iterating on. I just haven't pulled the trigger on that to close off some of these issues. If there's any of these particular issues that you want to discuss further, I believe Karsten scheduled some time at the informal meeting tomorrow where we could discuss these. But as editor, I don't really believe that any of these, with the exception of the should we consider making TLS a must, merits discussion, face to face. So can we switch to that issue, Karsten? So we had a long discussion at IETF 96 on this topic. And at the time, we went with a proposal from Zach, which was basically mandatory TLS and on by default. But since that point, we've reopened it because there was this feeling from, can you scroll up a little bit so we can get to the latest comments? So looking at the second bullet here, there was a feeling that perhaps OS co-op or application level security hadn't been well understood or reasonably discussed during that meeting. There certainly were a lot of people who are more interested in transport security, who have implementations, who aren't planning on changing the type of security that they're using as they change transports. So looking at the second point here, it's basically considering that co-op over TCP may be protected by other layers, and that a constrained device may not be able to support multiple implementations. It's really the last, OS co-op was not adopted at the time when the previous discussion was held, not sufficiently understood and considered in the discussion. So I think we should have that discussion here today. I don't know who wants to represent OS co-op. You can do that too. But this is the biggest issue that we need to close so that I can move forward. I really need the equivalent of a pull request from someone so that we can close this once and for all and not revisit it. So it'd be helpful to have people who have different points of view to come to the mic and present those.
Yeah, this is honest. So I think it really depends what we are trying to accomplish here. On one hand, we have things like the co-op specification, also talking about DTLS to protect the communication. And DTLS provides a couple of security services that can conveniently be used. And do we want to reuse them? Now we have seen some other work with OS co-op at the application layer, which may mean that people don't use DTLS and just use application layer security. Maybe not, who knows? But the risk of essentially what Göran is after is to not say anything, to not say must implement, to not say must use, which essentially then leaves the choices open. And the question is that going to make the security then better if we leave things open? Maybe it does, maybe not. Typically, when we have had lots of choices, then that didn't make the ultimate security protection better. So that's, for me, that's the level of understanding I would like to get from this discussion on, like, what are we trying to accomplish?
So Göran was in the queue. Do you want to go first, or should Göran go first?
So I just wanted to say that I see your point, Hannes, but Francesca Palombini, we are not trying to not mandate security. The point is really, we do agree that security must be mandated. It's just that there are different options now. We feel OS co-op is one, DTLS. So we think that it will be important to mandate once one make the choice of TLS to mandate what exactly are what are the things that one must consider, but to give the option at least to other types of security. I think it's well expressed there, but just to underline it again.
You want to go on?
But he's no longer in the queue. So. Oh, he is.
There really is a big red button.
Yes. Hi, Geron.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you see me also?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Just reiterating this discussion we had on the email list recently is there are a number of questions here. The question is not whether we're going to mandate security or not. The issue is that some constrained devices may not be able to support multiple security protocols. So if we mandate TLS, then using the features of co-op, like for instance, protecting co-op over UDP and co-op over TCP with a similar mechanism would be less efficient if we mandate TLS on the one side and DTLS also on the other side. So that's one issue. Another issue is which draft should actually specify what are the relevant security protocols to use. So should each draft say that it's mandatory to implement this security protocol, or like the mail discussion was indicating, we may not yet know what is the right deployment security for many applications. So maybe we're not at the stage of mandating a particular security protocol at this time. So those were my main comments. And there were also discussion about the meaning of on by default and whether that was a good formulation.
This is Hannes again. So I think there wasn't really ever the discussion about sort of what mandatory security means, because that doesn't mean anything. But I think it was similar to the co-op question or many other protocol. There's something from an interoperability point of view that one needs to specify so that it actually works in a case. That's sort of a common requirement. And what is that going to be? And that's sort of the challenge that we are facing here right now. In terms of what you said on DTLS versus TLS, and that may not be efficient, like DTLS is obviously intentionally designed to be extremely similar to TLS, so that by itself doesn't make a huge difference. So if you have a deployment of co-op over DTLS, adding the functionality for the co-op over TLS over TCP is not such a huge effort, because that's what drove this work all along. If that at that time that was the consideration, because, and as Brian raised, there was the point of like, why didn't we go all the way then to the HTTP version over TCP right away, which then raised the question.
Just addressing. Sorry, Hannes. Just addressing that comment. Yes, that clearly that was not the point I was trying to make. But still, there is an alternative to be efficient, to efficiently protect co-op over TCP and co-op over UDP using application layer security. That was the point I was trying to make, not particularly in comparison with TLS.
What is also, I think, worthwhile to take into account is that that the currently specified application layer security is not on par with what TLS provides. TLS provides much more on features. I'm a little bit worried that we will, in a step-by-step fashion, figure out that it doesn't provide the same, and we are essentially rebuilding TLS at the application layer in some form or the other. And then we are suddenly surprised that it's as complex as TLS. I would I would even go as far as saying that maybe we should rethink the application layer security and say, let's just run TLS, specifically 1.3, over the application layer protocol. Because ultimately, it's like it exchanges messages. It has this the zero round trip exchange, and you know, like that's not much different than some of the application layer security solutions. So we could actually avoid having too much redundant code to begin with. But it's that's a little bit more forward-looking approach than, and I don't have anything written up on that.
Could I add to this? Can you hear me? No.
Yes.
Could I just say, comment on Hannes' statement here? So if it is the case, I agree that OSCOAP, while OSCOAP is mature in the sense of it's ready for implementation, it's not at all in the same status as TLS. But if we go for the case that Hannes was speculating here, that we will actually do something like TLS on application layers on application layer, in that case, we don't want TLS to be mandatory implemented on transport layer. That's another reason why we should not decide on what security protocol to use in this case, because we don't want duplicate security protocols.
Actually, I'm not so sure about that, because when we did this application layer security, or attempted to do this application layer security work in the OWASP working group, one thing that we realized is that since the security terminates at different endpoints, clearly the transport layer terminates at different places than the application layer security. Even if it's on the same node, it may still be different processes and so on. You actually, in many cases, want to have both. So that's why it may actually be more common to run both protocols than one would think.
Carsten Moormann from the room microphone. There are several things here that make things a little bit more complicated. One is that the TLS is highly implicated with web security, so it's relatively inflexible with respect to what you actually can do with it, because people will do what's actually needed for web security and try to remove things from TLS that have been found detrimental to web security. But application layer security actually is a little bit more multifaceted, so it's quite useful to have a more powerful toolkit there. I actually wrote a draft running TLS over CoAP a long time ago. So I think the basic idea is pretty good. So you can actually extract the handshake protocol out of TLS to get keys in place and actually run OSCOAP with those keys. That works fine. I'm not saying we should not reuse TLS components, but I think we need a more powerful toolkit, and saying that we always have to use TLS as a transport layer security solution. I'm not so happy with that. And I think we made a very, very good decision when we did 7252 by keeping things a little bit open, by having a mode that is not secured at the transport layer, and having a mode that is secured at the transport layer with 3 submodes: PSK, RPK, and cert mode. So we have some flexibility there. And yes, there is a mandatory to implement on the RPK mode in 7252, but that's probably more of a RFC 6919 must, but we know you won't, instead of a real must. I mean, it's good guidance that if you don't know what to do, you use RPK. It's just guidance that hasn't been followed very much recently. So in summary, I think following the guidance of 7252 would be very good here. And doing something different than what 7252 did would require a lot of additional rationale.
Okay, so after this pitching in for Juan Perez, who said that on the Jabber, one of the reasons to use TLS was driven by the desire to do co-op over the open internet, as opposed to the edge through co-op UDP. And he also says that he does see the constrained devices may not be able to have multiple security implementations.
Jim Schad. Running TLS over the app protocol would solve one of the things I'm worried about, which is any sort of proxy in the middle that terminates your TLS connection is going to be a security leak point. And there's no way, if you use transport layer security, that you're going to be able to know if that is happening, let alone who's doing it. So in a lot of respects, if that's what you want to think about as a big issue, application level security of some type is really the only way you can solve it. That being said, belt and suspenders doesn't bother me. So I don't object to mandating it as long as they don't interfere with each other in terms of using them.
So there are about 5 people in this room who have an opinion on this. Michael, go to the microphone.
Ari Keränen. One comment on this. Multiple layers of security is in general a good idea. On the other hand, we spent quite a lot of effort when designing co-op to make it very small footprint, able to fit the class 1 devices and still have some room for application. And the DTLS part is fairly substantial piece of footprint in an implementation. So if we can get similar security features and services with object security as we get with TLS, those we really care about, to me it would make a lot of sense to be able to only implement object security, especially on the class 1 devices. But I guess Göran and Francesca have better numbers on that, but I would assume you would be running into issues, especially on the very constrained end, which we also very dearly care about.
This is Hannes. Yeah, and this is where the deception starts, because we are comparing apples and oranges, which is exactly what I was worried about. Because you essentially compare a signed message, for example, at the application layer with something that all the security services that DLS provides. And DLS also provides a negotiation of the different cipher suites. It provides server-side authentication. It provides multiple different key exchange mechanism. And with very sophisticated crypto. If you want the same security services at the application layer, it will be as much code as before. However, many of those things are the properties that DLS have is not something that people came up because it was so funny, because those are the things that you typically need. You want to have some crypto agility because that's why you want to have the negotiation. You want to, when you start with public key crypto, you want to fall back to symmetric key cryptography for performance reason. Also in the IoT world, you don't want to digitally sign every message that comes out of the sensor, and so on, and the list goes on. And I'm already seeing today that OSCOOP is sort of like the promise for small devices that are unable to run the crypto. But then I see documents already being brought forward that add a Diffie-Hellman exchange. So that's the next. And so, have you seen that document?
can we focus on what we should do with the TCP draft for now?
But
I
it
mean,
gets exactly to that point, Carsten, because this is being sold to us as let's not mandate DLS because we have this simple lightweight solution at the application layer. That's the promise. And in fact, that promise is not true.
Ari Keränen, I don't think anyone claims OSCOPE is lighter than DTLS. It's just, no. I didn't say that. I said if you have to have both, it's heavier, and it could be too much for a constraint device. What I'm saying, if you can run on class 1, you can run DTLS, that we know, and that's what we're doing already today. We know you can run on class 1 device object security. But can you fit both at the same time? You may run out of your space. I mean, I said I don't have the numbers, but I would assume they are not that much common code there we could be using.
The comment that I made earlier about also running DLS then at the application layer may sort of deal with that issue, but we haven't explored. But Carsten said that he has a document that I haven't even been aware of. That may be another alternative.
Well, actually, it's not an alternative because it can supply the keys for OSCOPE.
Sorry, we understand that. I don't know how to talk to you.
Well, you are still online, so we are watching you all the time, which is pretty interesting because you have this dark outline before a white background. So you really look like a black hat there on that screen.
Okay.
Okay, so what I haven't heard anyone saying is that we don't need end-to-end security. So I think something like OSCOPE is not going away if we need to do security over multiple hops. So something like that will always be part of our tool set. And I think I heard the argument that using 2 levels of security at the same time may often be exactly what you want. For instance, because you want to protect the link against eavesdropping, but want to protect your data just on the integrity level. That's wonderful. But there are other cases where you just don't have the resources to do that, and then it would be nice to have just one level of security. And if the one that your application needs is end-to-end, that makes it hard to actually do communication security at the same point in time. So this is what I'm hearing. And yeah, the TLS is the 800-pound gorilla, of course. So everything that we do will kind of measure itself against TLS. But yeah, as I said on the other microphone, maybe following the lead of what we already have standardized is not such a bad idea.
No additional.
What would that mean? We write that we should support mandatorily implement APK in the hope that this is sort of according to a strategy, propose something that is not realistic and.
Well,
Or what is
the MTI part of RPK in 7252 is if you implement DTLS, then this is what you should implement as well.
Essentially the same.
Well, unless there is good rationale to depart from that. Maybe we have learned that RPK is not as popular as we thought in 2013. I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on that.
So Hannes, so from our experience, what is most popular despite constrained devices is certificates, and which is a surprise. It has to do with the experience, operational support tools, etc. And that's why people prefer certificates. It's a technology they are familiar with. They don't care much about the code size and etc. as we had thought maybe in the future, but that's what they do. I don't know about the Microsoft story, but TLS on embedded devices.
In our experience, people use PSK. Like we have tens of thousands of networks that use PSK because this is used in industrial applications where people actually like the idea of just writing a PSK. You understand that's what you write, and they have no problem writing it in every device. That's not a problem. So people like this as well.
Yeah, it's maybe I don't know why. So yeah, clearly your experience is different than ours. Obviously, we provide we also distribute the keys automatically. So it's not that the user or the administrator or the developer literally writes the key there himself, because that wouldn't scale. So there's tool support, but at least in the discussions I've been, it was more the like people had existing PKI installations already, even wanted to reuse the existing CA infrastructure and so on, even at the expense of having some additional certification hierarchy, CA hierarchy.
So Thomas Oteine, I think both views are. I mean, I just wanted to say that it's not everybody's going to certificates, and the reason is that in some of these networks, just having a lot, we're talking about classes of devices and we're talking about sizes of flash and RAM, but we also have to consider that some networks can transport a lot of packets and some cannot transport a lot of packets. And the thing we have in 6-dish, and we'll talk about it tomorrow for sure, but the problem we have is the limit of number of packets per second rather than the size, because flash and RAM was going up anyways, but the number of packets back and forth, and running a CA and just validating certificates towards it is too many packets back and forth for it to be realistic in the types of networks we're considering. Yeah, just as
so. Are you in your deployment? Is it actually TLS that is used, or some pre-shared secret to something else? Like your own crypto or so, or is it TLS or DTLS?
It's what wireless heart you're using. So it's neither DTLS nor TLS. It's a CTM star based application level, so very similar to Squad.
Okay. Yeah, that may be a different comparison as well, because Carsten was asking like, what did we learn something from that work, and sort of that's my impression, but. I don't know what you guys support in your deployment, but
So one other thing that is happening, of course, is ACE. So that may change that picture as well, because we have ways of deriving those keys that we didn't have before.
So from the Java room, Juan Perez, so he was talking that cloud providers and would end up requiring TLS even if the standard does not require it. And that may push the non-TLS use case closer to the edge.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, I'm not sure why.
Maybe a little slower, a little louder.
Yeah, maybe I'll
Phone
look
out of
like
the
this.
stand and hold it in your hand.
Yeah, I think it's better like this. Is it better like this? Maybe. Okay. And on the deployment, so Juan Perez, he has seen both certificates and PSK, and he agrees much use of certificates when I expected more PSK for smaller devices.
Okay, so that looks like the landscape has shifted a little bit since 3 years ago, and the priority of RPK we saw 3 years ago isn't quite something we want to replicate today.
Yes, Dave Robin. Well, is that even on? you got to really eat this mic. Okay. Yeah, I would just plus one on that is when we were building BACnet for the building automation space, we were trying small. We had symmetric keys, and we were trying to go something bigger. And not only did we go to certificates, we went to full root. Chain. I need to be able to put my CA in your box. Don't give me these device, manufacturer specific things. And so it actually got bigger than we thought it was. It went in that direction. So just another data point. Yeah. Basically, that was because big companies that already had their CAs didn't want to change. So they wanted us to use their certificates and their management, and so we had to adapt to them.
Yeah, there clearly is a bottleneck at the HSM space, which kind of seems to constrain people very much at the moment. Not sure that. Yeah, but mostly HSMs. That's currently what I'm hearing out of the industry. They're not going the HSMs for the security modes they actually want.
But if you want to integrate with IBM or Azure, you have to.
Okay, so what I've been hearing is the room arguing with Hannes.
Actually, it's just Ericsson people arguing with me.
So it's not my job to draw a conclusion anyway.
Yeah.
So hi, acting as a chair now. The thing is that I didn't see a full conclusion on the topic either, I must say, despite the very lengthy discussion and despite the two groups there. So at this point, I'm at a loss. I don't know how to continue actually. What should be taken to the mailing list or?
Well, we can pick this up again on Friday. So maybe that's something we want to do. Just use the 48 hours we have till Friday, or the 40 hours to come up with a formula that we can agree on. One important thing that we haven't been talking about is that we actually want to get this by the IESG. So we have to have a statement that people in ISG will like.
Would it be possible before Friday, you'd mentioned that you had an earlier draft for TLS at the application layer for co-op? Is that something you could dig up and share?
Sure.
Comment on Jabber. So Juan Perez, he says that he's with Hannes on this one, and he's representing the cloud provider side. Yeah, but on.
Okay.
Sorry, he's asking for the queue. Yeah.
Yeah. Juan Perez, you're on.
Hi, can you see me? Great.
Yeah, I was just saying that essentially, I've seen several cloud providers now provide TLS TCP implementations as a minbar, and if of course we have the option to provide different layers and or potentially options, but I suspect that those folks will end up falling to one side and essentially partitioning the story, so really creating interop only within the type of device that does support that. And then effectively pushing the non-TLS app layer potentially to the edge, which seems like there's coverage already. If I'm not super familiar with.
You're breaking up.
It seems that for the cloud folks, given that that's the min bar, then
Okay, but I think we have got the gist of what Juan Perez was trying to say. So I pull you out of the speaker position. Sorry about that, but we couldn't really hear you at the end. Yes, we could talk about that tomorrow.
Or Friday.
Or Friday? Or,
Do we want to do it at the official working group meeting?
Well, we could talk about the TLS over CoAP thing tomorrow, because that's
okay. That would be great. That would be great if we could introduce that.
But we could try to use the next 40 hours to come up with that formula. And
on a personal note here, so Alexander Pelov, I seem to be, from my personal understanding, to be lacking some part of understanding what exactly is TLS. I mean, we are not going to be saying, okay, all devices must 100% run TLS, right? Must run on TCP or things like this.
Possibly we are going to say that, yes.
Okay, but the thing is that in OSCOAP, from what I read in the past versions, allows to protect parts of the core payload and some of the options, and avoid some other things. So I'm not personally, I'm not really aware of. Okay, but I think I need to read my reading here, so to understand a little bit more. But I would feel, that we should not oblige people to use TCP to the end device, right? So if this is off the table and I need to read more about this, then I mean we need to discuss this. But it seems to me that for me the question is not clear.
So what we tried to do here is we have this document CoAP over TCP, and it is for devices that run TCP all the way to the end and use CoAP. That was motivated by some problems in enterprise deployments which blocked UDP traffic. And so now the document needs to be finalized, and we ran into the issue of what do we write in the security consideration section, since we have to provide some mandatory to implement security mechanism. And what exactly is that text? And so there are obviously various different options. Like the option to say it shouldn't be used with security, that's presumably off the table, but since the document talks about various different ways to use TLS. Even the title says CoAP over TLS as well. So the question is like, how far do we want to go with the recommendations on the security side? Should it say you have to implement TLS support with this document? Do you have to use TLS? And then the question that Carsten raised with the different type of credential types came up. Or should we say we could also sort of, or you could use this, or you could use that, and it's up to you, because this will only be used in a larger context anyway, where you need to decide about security. That's essentially the question that is
Alex, just like, guys, we could be talking about this forever, and still we have
but
so many
this means that we will still need OSCOAP for UDP.
Sorry?
We will still be needing us co-op for UDP case.
But guys,
for co-op.
but maybe this we can, because we already decided we are going to continue talking on this tomorrow and the next day. So there is still like 3 or 4 drafts left and like 15 minutes actually.
Thank you. So, Brian, you had some more slides, and I think one was quite useful here, listing the guidance that we actually have on this issue. So these are ISG statements, I think, that tell us what we should be doing. So maybe everybody can look at these slides offline, and we can have a mailing list discussion and use tomorrow and Friday to finish this. Okay, so the next item we have on the list is a remote presentation. Bill, are you still there?
I'm here. Can you see me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can see a very small view. Yes.
Good. Okay, good morning or good afternoon, whichever it is that you have. Yeah, so if my audio comes through fine and also my video, then I'll proceed with the presentation. But if for some reason we have cut in the network, then please feel free to skip this presentation and go on to the next one. Carsten, if you can push the next slide.
Yes, main change.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'll try to recap this as quickly as I can. So since we don't have so much time. We had a presentation in the last IETF meeting where we had a slightly different version of doing protocol negotiation, and we used the origin service, the .well-known/core, to expose the different kinds of transports that CoAP endpoint can use to send and receive CoAP messages. But then during the meeting, it turned out not to be a very good idea. And we got quite a lot of feedback about alternative ways of doing that. And what we chose to adopt is to go with a slightly different path, where we use the core resource directory and use the core link format to get the work done. So Carsten, the next slide, please.
Yes.
So with using the resource directory, what we did was, well, firstly, we removed the idea that we had in 03, which is we used a transport type link attribute and an alternate location regulation. So in other words, whenever you did a get on the core well-known resource, you got these extra attributes. And instead of that, in the next slide, you would see that firstly, there will be a resource directory parameter called AT, which extends the two interfaces when the endpoint registers to the resource directory. So this is registration and update interface. And you can register a list of URIs, which is optional, and it tells the clients that need to look up the resource directory that in addition to the resources that I'm registering and the links that you can access through the endpoint address that I've used to register them with in the resource directory, you can also access them over these alternate locations. So that's the gist of that. And then the other attribute, or sorry, the other resource directory parameter is in the next slide, which is just the transport type. So there, a client can obtain the transport types available at the endpoint by using the TT RD parameter, as shown in the example. So it doesn't constrain you to doing anything else, except that if you want to look up a transport type on a specific kind of node, you can actually give a wildcard query, or then you can query for a specific transport type like TCP, and then you get the resource back. So there are advantages and disadvantages to this approach. In the next slide, I have outlined some of the benefits. We can basically leverage what the resource directory provides, and the API is very consistent, so that makes it very easy to introduce this functionality. It's an optional functionality, so it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you don't have AT or TT coming back from the resource directory, the endpoint doesn't support it. It just means that if you wish to do so, then you can use this. And then there are other things that resource directory provides, like group functions and commissioning tools that we can take advantage of. We haven't actually explored the group function set yet, but I think that it's really nice that we can now use HTTP as well to understand how to do multiple transports and co-op level. And particularly when we have DNS-based service discovery, we can map the resource directory entries to the ones in the DNS. So there are some drawbacks, of course. In the next slide, I've listed two. The elephant in the room is basically the fact that you need to have a resource directory present to do this. We try to address that in the next version of the draft. So in the next version of the draft, we'll try to ensure that we can find a way where endpoints can interact directly with the clients to explain which kinds of alternative transports are available. But in this version, currently the lifetime of the alternate transport, so particularly when you have a transport that can go up and down, it's bound to the registration lifetime. So in order to update the available transport, then you have to send a registration update. So unless we introduce a new parameter for per transport for the lifetime, we can't actually deal with that at the moment. And then finally, obviously, we don't have a way for clients to signal to the server yet how to enable temporarily an alternate transport. So especially for energy constrained devices where you might actually have the high powered interfaces inactive for a while, and you would just want to enable them for a short period of time to send some bursty traffic. That's missing at the moment. So that's what we're working on. So that's my presentation.
Bill, a question. This is Hannes. So you introduced new functionality in RD, and as far as I know, there are at least 2 SDOs who use RD in their architecture. The OCF OIC and the OMA with their lightweight M2M protocol. Did you check whether these new changes or these new additions are actually in line with what these guys are doing? Because the reason is I'm worried is, of course, this work went on for a very long time. So there was a little bit the expectation it would be finalized soon, and now that it's changes, and maybe that you talked about the new version with other features and so on. So I'm worried about misalignment, and I'm not sure people will use RD as is in this document as a standalone, or whether they are going to use it rather as part of a framework. But those could get misaligned very easily, which would be a sad thing.
We'll check on that then. We had this meeting. It was fairly obvious that we needed to change direction at the last Berlin meeting, and this was proposed. This seemed to be the most feasible method. So yeah, we should probably do that. We wanted to present this right now in the core to see if that's okay. And once that's done, then yeah, we can take this forward. So then we can check with OMA and OCF as well with those things, certainly.
So Bill, one question I have is you are de-emphasizing well-known core and emphasizing resource directory. That's probably a good thing. But can we actually maybe do both? Because the whole point about resource directory is really that it provides information that is allowing a node to self-describe, and well-known core is essentially doing the same thing. So shouldn't it be possible to have the same kind of information in both places?
Yes, that's what we're working on. I don't really think core is the best place for various reasons. Firstly, the way the link is it was described in the previous draft was not completely correct. So that's a bit broken, and that's why we wanted to ensure that we don't repeat that mistake. So I think we need to use the well-known interface, probably introduce a new resource instead of core, and then get that done. So yeah, indeed, I agree with you. We wanted to get the resource directory work done first, and then move on to the other one. So once it's okay with what we are proposing with the RD, then we can do that both ways. Yeah.
So I'm asking Michael Costa and you to have a little chat over the mailing list about this. That's probably the best way to move this forward, because I think Michael has some ideas on that.
Yeah, we spoke with Michael as well previously, and actually Zach has been very helpful with us with this version. So yeah, we would like to, and particularly Hannes as well, please review and respond to the mailing list. We'll bring the discussion there.
Yeah, but who has read the last version of this draft? Who wants to read it now that they have heard about it? A few more hands go up, 6 or so. Okay, I think that there is some pretty good karma in the room about this draft right now, even though people haven't read it yet. So we would encourage you to work with Michael and other people to define this in a way that works well with the resource directory. Thank you, Bill.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so we have 4 minutes left to talk about the resource directory, which maybe we already had a great lead in now. The resource directory is being edited. It is moving forward. There is still a number of questions and to-dos, and I'm not going to go into that list right now because we don't have the time. I think the interesting question was already raised by Hannes. How do we make sure that we develop resource directory to completion in such a way that this makes sense together with the other SDOs that are using it? So Lightweight M2M uses the resource directory, but only the registration interface. We have had not so much feedback on the lookup interface. I don't know, does OCF use the lookup interface?
It's being designed right.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael Kosters, Samsung Smart Things. In OCF, I believe that we're still in the process of specifying how RD will work. So I think it's a co-development opportunity at this point.
Okay. So how do we get this organized?
Well, through me is one possibility because I'm a member of both groups.
Should we maybe do a virtual interim on this a couple of weeks from now? A virtual interim, a phone call, just for moving resource directory forward?
That would be a great idea, a resource directory conference call. I will make a note of that and work with you to schedule that.
Okay, it would be good if this would be prepared from the OCF side, so people coming
Yes,
in.
yeah, it would be on our side to prepare and get the right people involved.
Just on Christian Groves, just on that point, virtual interims with OCF, maybe we should be looking at having more of them or having expanded scope, because there's issues such as the interface descriptions, and we have a lot of work in common, so maybe that's something we can maybe look at more sort of formalizing.
Not just with OCF, we can do them with OMA as well. Okay, the other question I had was, there is a lot of text in the document about DNSSD integration. Now, this text looks pretty good, but when you read it, you also get the feeling this has never been implemented. So how do we get feedback on the DNSSD adaptation? Is any SEO actually using that? Peter.
Peter van der Stok. I'm afraid that I'm the cause of all that. And the cause has not done any real implementation to test it. But when I talk about it, they still say that they want it very much and they will be really disappointed if it doesn't come in. So you don't get feedback, but on the other hand, they really think it's a nice facility. And also here it was mentioned that it is a nice facility. So yeah, that's where I am.
I think we all agree it's a nice facility, but how do we complete it?
Complete.
Yeah, I mean, how do we get a reasonable level of assurance that the stuff in there actually works?
Okay, I did some experiments at home, but there has not been any experiments elsewhere. If that's the answers to questions, I don't think so.
So would this maybe something that we actually want to put into a separate draft? To develop
I'm not
on
against that. Actually, I like this resource directory to come out. Actually, I would like it to be published as it is now, and that everything new will be additional drafts, but okay. I won't mind.
Okay, so I would just like to put in a call for contributions on this DNSSD thing, because I also think it's a neat thing to have in there. I completely agree with that one. I just would like to make sure that we have more implementer feedback from that.
Was it agreed for you to be on a different draft?
We didn't say that. I just wanted to ask, would that maybe a good idea? Okay, we are out of time for this meeting. We only dropped 2 drafts, so we are almost good. And again, I remind everyone we will have a meeting on Thursday, which officially is a hallway meeting, but we will have a way to discuss things. Thomas,
when and where?
It's in Park Ballroom 3. And yeah, unfortunately, that room doesn't have remote capabilities. I will put up my iPad as usual. So there will be a Google Hangout where you can join if you want to do remote participation, but the quality, of course, will not be near what we get from MeetEcho. So the link to that Google Hangout will be on the core Jabber at the start of the meeting. Okay, thank you for now, and see you on Thursday and on Friday.